Welcome back to the Radio FWD podcast. I'm honored to present Peter Kuplowsky, the lead programmer at Midnight Madness at TIFF, an independent film producer and graduate of the University of Toronto Cinema Studies program. So let's just jump right into this, Peter. I wanted to start off by saying welcome back to U of T. What sort of memories does the University of Toronto bring back to you, knowing that you were a member of the Film Student Union and that you have this history of studying at U of T?
I have such fond memories of U of T, and I really owe a lot of what I did during my, I think I did 5 years of an undergrad, and then I did a year as a master's, so I was there for 6 years, and, yeah, I really do owe a lot. The Cinema Studies Student Union, SINSU, was, a terrific organization to be a part of. I really cut my teeth on curating there. I was a booker for Sinsu, and we were in such a golden age of a period. It was really the last gasp of when 35 millimeter prints were still readily available with all the distributors. They hadn't like junked their depots yet, and so it was just we were kids in a candy store, just every week picking what film did we want to watch on 35 millimeter film, and I even remember I have a very fond memory too of discovering that U of T has a pretty incredible collection of 35 millimeter prints that range from straight to video movies that probably never played theatrically, but which they struck prints for distributor screenings, to very obscure Taiwanese and Hong Kong movies that Colin Geddes, who's my predecessor at TIFF's Midnight Madness program, had donated to the University of Toronto. And I remember negotiating with Bart Testa the opportunity to put together what I called a supplementary syllabus, and it was really just an excuse for Bart and me and some other students to just watch these movies on 35. And we would like write kind of a generic lecture that was like 10 minutes long, and then we just watch the movies, and
Right.
that was so much fun. And I really do miss I miss that because it was curation with very little judgment or rules or restrictions. It was just like whatever we were interested in doing, and it often was without us even knowing what to expect. Especially when we were print diving through U of T, we would just, I've never heard of this movie. Let's put it on. Let's see what it's like. Specifically, all these Taiwanese melodramas that starred Bridget Lin, none of which we found were very good, but they were all very educational, very interesting to see and observe
Well,
after you
that's
watch
part of
them.
everyone's film discovery journey, is finding out what they love and what they don't love, right? But it sounds like the exploring film with this kind of naive curiosity and just like pure passion is something that you seem nostalgic for. That's another thing I wanted to ask you about is, uh, you know, do you still watch movies for fun, or is it sort of clouded by I watched an incredible interview from For Real, based in Seattle. Thomas had interviewed you a couple years ago, and I've used that as a resource to prepare for this. And I found that one of the things you mentioned was watching over 350 films to prepare for a festival just 2 years ago. I'm sure that's only gotten more and more intensive as you've gone along with your career. So I was wondering how you avoid fatigue and how you can still, enjoy movies for the pure pleasure of it. Or maybe I'm overestimating how detrimental that is as a film lover. It sounds great to watch 350 films for a career.
Yeah, I mean, it does. I do feel like it's created some mental degradation.
Brain
I
rot,
prob
as
yeah,
the kids say.
there's definitely a little bit of brain rot to how much I absorb. I used to also watch short films at the same time as as features. I curated short films for Fantastic Fest for many years, and uh, I eventually had to give up watching short films as much as I was, just because it was just too much. And as started my producing career, and I'm producing a lot more actively these days, I really did have to make some space for it. And there's only so much time you can spend in front of a screen as well. And so I do find that there are periods where after a lot of watching it, I do find I want to take a break. That being said, most of the time I'm watching these movies at home, in my sort of home setup, either on a television screen or a portable projector. And it is a different experience to go see something into a theater. So I mean, I still love going to see movies in theaters, and I often find that I miss out a lot of the summer movies because I'm spending my summer watching films for Toronto, and I'm seeing a lot of fall movies well in advance, or a lot of movies that will be released next year, the following year, well in advance. But I sometimes miss out in the summer movies, and I do sometimes take a break where I go like, okay, I'm not going to do any screening this weekend. I'm just going to go to a multiplex and just try to catch up on everything I've been missing.
Mhm.
And I do find like seeing a big studio blockbuster can be a palate cleanser when I then go back to the world of like low budget horror.
Right. You mentioned the theater experience. That's another thing I wanted to ask you about. Um, I mean, I've lived in several cities throughout my life and have gone to movies in several cities throughout my life. And I think that nothing comes close to the cinema experience in Toronto. The passion
I
that the
I
city has
agree.
for cinema and for film culture is unprecedented. And the fact that there are, at any given moment, 4 to 5 different cinemas playing obscure or older films, anniversary editions, remasters, 35 to 70 millimeter printings. Um, Avant-garde film is really remarkable. The accessibility in the city of finding that, you know, cinema experience is really amazing. So I wanted to ask you if you could speak to Toronto itself and how you feel the city, loves their film.
I think it's incredible, and what I'm so heartened by is that when I was an undergrad, um, I was very jealous of New York, of LA, of even Austin, and the kind of rep scene that they had, the repertory programming that they had in those communities. And I really feel like since my undergrad, Toronto has really become an incredible city for repertory programming. And it wasn't, really the case. I mean, we had the TIFF Cinematheque at Jackman Hall. You had a lot of the indie single screen cinemas like the Bloor, which is now the Hot Docs. But we had the Fox and the Royal, and some of the Bloor especially. Well, I worked at the Bloor Cinema for several years, and we were doing fun rep programming, but it was not at the level of what I think it is now. Part of that is also just because I think a lot of cult movies and older movies have we're in a golden age of restorations of a number of smaller labels have been able to take over the ownership and the theatrical rights to films that you really couldn't find theatrical distributors for in the past because the companies that own them just didn't care about them anymore. And I feel because of that, it has not allowed only Toronto to have a better rep scene, but I really think at independent single screen cinemas all over North America and the world, it's just easier and easier for people to have access, especially with digital DCPs, just access to high quality versions of great cinema, and so that's been part of it as well. But I definitely think we have some of the best movie houses. I mean, I'm always surprised at how small a lot of the cinemas are that I experience movies in the United States when I do trips there, and I really think our audiences are some of the most passionate, enthusiastic audiences. I still think that Montreal's Fantasia might have the most enthusiastic audience I've ever watched a movie with. I still think there's they're the most emotional, and I get the biggest rush.
Really?
Yeah, I really do believe that. I mean,
I'd love for you to speak on some more detail about that. That
well,
seems
I just
super interesting because
yeah, Fantasia. I don't know. When you watch a movie in the Hall Theater in the Concordia, and it's like a big crowd pleaser, it really plays well in that room. And maybe it's just the acoustics of that space, but uh, some of my favorite movie experiences have been at Fantasia, and it could be biased. Fantasia was the first film festival that I really seriously
oh, really?
engaged with, so I sort of have some nostalgia and loyalty mixed up with that as well.
Yeah, I was born in Montreal, so I always have a soft spot for Montreal, even though I'm a Bruins fan. I was gonna say, the thing you mentioned about the theater experience and the crowd pleasing aspect in Fantasia Festival is also something that's obviously comes with the territory of playing genre films and playing midnight screenings and playing midnight films. But there's a delicate balance that I think the Toronto crowd has figured out subconsciously without any sort of direction or any sort of explicit, like, don't talk during the movie. Obviously, you play a disclaimer at the beginning of the film, to respect the audience or whatever. But Toronto, this midnight screenings especially, have a wonderful atmosphere of respecting the craft, but also engaging with, you know, flamboyant reactions and like true passion, and then the movie ends and everyone's chatting about it and everyone's got their opinion and they're loud and rambunctious, but only when the credits roll. So again, like I'd love for you to speak on that. How does that even come about? Is it some sort of social contagion?
I mean, I think it goes back to this is a city that really does love movies. I mean, I've certainly had the odd screening in Toronto, as I think anyone who attends enough repertory screenings, you'll go to the odd screening of something. Usually Nicolas Cage is in it, and maybe the
uh
audience is a little unruly where it's like, okay, calm down, folks. He hasn't said anything funny yet. He hasn't done anything funny yet. He's just there. He's just
right.
existing. You can calm down on the ironic laughter. I mean,
Sure.
I've hosted a lot of Neil Breen screenings too, and I sometimes have to remind the audience, like, look, it's there's funny stuff in this movie, but sometimes it's just an image of Neil Breen. Like we don't have to like act like it's the funniest thing in the world right away. We can like let the movie. Let's try to enjoy the movie on its own terms as well, even though there's going to be ridiculously silly things. But in the context of Midnight, I just think my predecessors are largely responsible as well for the kind of ambience and atmosphere that they cultivated. The great Noah Cowan, Colin Geddes, they curated really terrific lineups for their tenure, and I think they cultivated a really savvy and smart audience. I think it's an audience that understands that to go to a Midnight Madness screening is not just to go for the movie, it's to go for the audience. It's to go for that experience that feels a little bit like a rock concert more than a
Yes.
movie experience.
100%.
But at the same time, like everyone is there, because they want to enjoy the movie. And I just think yeah, we're very lucky that's worked out that way. I know I've heard of genre festivals where the audience can be rambunctious to the point of like distraction, and where it
Sure.
can be very frustrating or very annoying or even disrespectful. But I love that we've struck that balance. I think it's similar to how I first experienced festivals in Montreal at Fantasia, which I mentioned earlier. But yeah, no, I think it's great. I love that it's that's what I love about midnight movies, is that they are inherently movies that are designed to be very reactive,
Sure.
and I think it's why filmmakers love taking films to TIFF in general. I think TIFF in general tends to have comedies play really well in Toronto, because you can immediately tell if a movie is working, and I think it's the same with midnight movies. Unless it's on the eraser head of the spectrum, which I think is a valid form of midnight
Yeah, you've mentioned that
filmmaking.
before. You've
Yeah,
mentioned, finding a balance between pure rambunctious joy and elation, and
yeah. The
that's
spectrum
sort of
is Eraserhead and Evil Dead. I feel is like this is the extremes. You
that's
can
the
either,
spectrum, right?
yeah, you can either go full Evil Dead or full Eraserhead, and I feel like to me they represent the polar opposites of a midnight experience, where they're prioritized, but they're both, I think, highly experimental works, and to me that is another aspect of midnight cinema that I think is important. I don't see the section as a genre film section exclusively. In a way, it's not Wavelengths, which is our experimental section in Toronto, but I think Midnight necessarily has to be somewhat experimental, at least with regards to genre itself.
Yeah, that's, I want to loop back around near the end of the, I have some questions prepared. I want to loop back around to your comment about rock concerts. In your interview with Thomas that I'd mentioned earlier, you brought up, or rather, he brought up a question regarding the industry's reaction to genre film and this, spectrum that you had mentioned previously. Um, and you gave a great answer, which is that it seems like the industry has a growing fascination, a growing interest and a growing financial interest in the performance of genre films. But we have a huge elephant in the room from last year, and that's The Substance, which I think is
Yeah.
has broken through the occlusion that genre films typically has and has broken through the mainstream. Were you expecting that reaction, or did this go beyond your wildest dreams of how big that film had gotten?
I wouldn't say it went beyond my wildest dreams. I think it certainly had a bigger impact than I was expecting. I did believe that after I saw the film in Cannes, that if they campaigned correctly, that they at the very least they would be able to put Demi Moore in a significant position to receive accolades. I think a lot of it just listen. I mean, the industry has always acknowledged genre as a sure bet that these movies make money. There's always an audience for them. I think maybe one of the issues the industry has been struggling with is that, um, I mean, I think the old star system models are not as reliable anymore. I think, like it's harder for films to be launched as like a vehicle for a certain celebrity factor. I think they're really the films that are again working time and time again tend to be high concept genre movies, and they're the movies that can also work economically and that they're not exorbitantly expensive to make, because they're not necessarily like superhero special effects extravaganzas. Um, and yeah, I mean, Substance. It's interesting. I think it's a movie that I am surprised at how wide its reach was. I wonder if it's a testament to just how the audience over the last couple of years, specifically with prestige companies like A24, like very much in popularizing genre to audiences that maybe steered clear in the past, and so they're more just comfortable with these kinds of movies, and had maybe never seen a body horror movie before. Because
Right.
I do feel like if you've never seen Society, if you've never seen a Cronenberg film, you've never seen even something like Slither, a movie like The Substance is going to really blow your socks off. You're really going to not have ever seen anything like that before. And I think for those people who have grown up on that film, it's nice to see a movie that's as full throated with its body horror and with its irreverence. Um, it makes for a very entertaining time. But I am surprised at like just simply how widespread the acclaim has been, and that even in categories like original screenplay are getting notices for something like The Substance. It's cool. I hope it continues. I hope it's just not a flash in the pan. I mean, we saw this arguably. It's not entirely without precedent. Movies like Aliens got similar recognition when that came
Oh,
out.
sure.
Silence of the Lambs, of course, is another example of like a horror film that did achieve that
Crossover.
kind of level of critical. But maybe it's just a case that the other kinds of movies that used to take up the air at the Academy Awards, less of those are being made, and less of those are even working or connecting. Um, with audiences, or critics for that matter, because it's no secret that the best picture nominees for a long time have not necessarily gone to the films that are commercially the most successful.
Right. To kind of tie this question together, um, I haven't, I wasn't able to find a discussion that you were a part of regarding a film that was part of this genre, this tradition of genre and satire that The Substance is in, but was caught up in a copyright and IP
Oh,
litigation suit. I wanted to ask you about that experience with The People's Joker, if that's okay. I was
well,
wondering how.
I will clarify in Vera's part. There was never any litigation, and there was never any suit. No one was sued, but it was an interesting experience. I mean, uh, I love any film that will push boundaries. I think the thing about a midnight section is it needs to remain in some form subversive, because at a certain point, you know, the most subversive horror film can become mainstream. And in fact, I mean, look at something like The Substance,
Yeah,
which some of its critics may say that it's kind of a mainstreaming of the body horror genre in the way that it is connected, and you know, there, because the movie does have its critics. It's not universally beloved. There are people that have
of
issues
course.
with it. With the case of the People's Joker, it was interesting. I saw the film, loved it, loved what Vera was doing, thought it was so brilliant and honest, and so refreshing, you know, especially in this period of, I feel like, superhero decline, where there has really been a cultural fatigue with this genre, on every strata. Um, and yeah, I mean, I'm just so grateful TIFF supported me on it. I mean, there were people who questioned whether this was something we would be able to do, but we did. You know, we were pretty rigorous about it. We had lawyers vet the film. um, Vera had a specific law firm vet the movie, and you know, at the end, what ended up happening was this is that, you know, a letter showed up, as Vera has reported about in many of her interviews, and it was strongly worded, and it was asking TIFF not to play the film. And we had a discussion about it, and a decision was made where Vera was going to, you know, take the film off the festival circuit and, you know, double check, double cross the T's, double dot the I's, make sure that no, she was fully in the right, with fair use. And but at the same time, uh, you know, Cameron Bailey really had my back, and we were committed to at least delivering its world premiere, and we were able to do so. And I honestly think it was the best thing that could have happened for that film, because it was a
That's
total
what I
Stri
was about to say.
it was a total Streisand effect. With the minute, you know, the minute it happened, oh, now this is the front page of Variety, the Hollywood Reporter. And so, you know, whatever Warner Brothers was thinking, if they didn't want anyone to know about this film, they probably went about it the wrong way.
Right, 100%. Well, I was gonna tie in again with, I wasn't sure about the details. I appreciate you clearing that up. But I was gonna tie that into how often, because of the content of some of the films that are submitted in genre, in towards the Midnight Madness program, how often you face challenges regarding censorship, given the topics and the violence that might be in the films, or maybe maybe some outside pressures from the organizers of the festival. I wonder how often you encounter those sort of issues.
What I love about working for TIFF is that, you know, we're not a committee-driven festival. It's a festival that really does trust its programming team and gives us a lot of autonomy. So I find also that I have the privilege of sitting and watching every movie I program with the audience at the world premiere. A lot of my peers, and a lot of my peers, not just at TIFF but at other festivals, don't have that luxury, because they'll introduce a movie and then they got to run and introduce another movie, or they got to run and do this. For me, it's the end of the night. There's nothing else for me to do. There's no other screenings. This is the only one. I'm not going anywhere. I could go to a party and come back for the Q&A, but I want to watch it with the audience. And so I got to sit there with the audience. And so whatever I screen, I really, you know, want to be honest and be like, I am willing to sit and watch this movie again.
Of course.
Um, so that's certainly a factor. Um, you know, there's I've said this in other interviews before. I mean, I'm programming for both myself, for what I think the audience is interested in, for what I think the industry is interested in. I'm programming also for, in an attempt to bring more people into the conversation of both genre and midnight cinema. So, you know, I'm always trying to see, like, which countries have we represented in this section. You know, where is genre filmmaking happening that the audience in Toronto specifically hasn't been exposed to yet. I'd love to
Sure.
introduce them to those filmmakers, or to that region of the world. And so those are all factors that I'm considering. Whether it comes, you know, whether it's like, I mean, People's Sugar wasn't the first time I was dealing with something that was copyright related. I mean, I'm a big fan of this editing collective that no longer, they disbanded a few years ago, called Racer Trash, and I actually wanted to show some Racer Trash remixes as part of the Midnight Madness selection during our COVID years, and Tiff just couldn't. You know, it was how Racer Trash worked is they would take pre-existing movies and completely re-edit them, and completely re-scramble them. And they did this without the rights. And I was like, let's just do free screenings of it. But I really do think what they're making is transformative. I think it's legitimately art. I think in many ways it transcends the original work. Um, and I really wanted to support that stuff, and we could not figure that out that year. And so that's one of the reasons why I did set up Midnight Dankness, which is
Of course.
currently basically it's a pregame for TIFF. It's a night of programming that I do the night before TIFF, where
Yeah, Rap World was amazing.
yeah, Rap World was, another one. And that was one too where um I mean there was a couple factors of why I didn't consider it for the main section. One was it was only an hour long, and I felt like it would be there's certain economics in terms of how much a TIFF ticket price costs. I think it's absolutely a worthwhile experience, but I just sort of felt like it's tough for me to play something that's just an hour long, um, in them and have that take up a slot. There was also copyright stuff with that movie that I was like, oh, maybe I'm not going to wade into this for the festival this year. It already screened at another festival, but I really am thinking of Midnight Dangus could be an opportunity or a space that I can use to play some of these films that may have people's Joker-esque issues. But in terms of like content, like in terms of violence or subject matter, I feel like the closest I was ever concerned about was maybe Rob Savage's dash cam. That was one that I went back and forth with a couple people about positioning that film, and I'm still glad I played it because I know a lot of people don't like the film, and I think there's a lot of valid reasons to not engage with that movie. But I do think that movie was doing something very interesting. It was speaking to a very specific cultural moment, and I found it a compelling work. But for
If
the
you could
most
explain
part,
to our viewers, a little bit about the details, that'd be
oh,
awesome.
Dashcam was the follow up to Rob Savage's Host, and it was a found footage movie from the perspective of a quite manic woman, Annie Hardy, who's a musician who was basically playing a hyperbolic version of herself, and she's a conspiracy theorist in real life. She's says a lot of very provocative things that especially in our charged climate is can be very controversial. Uh, I'd never seen a horror protagonist like that. I'd never seen a character that was so self-interested and to the point where like she's not really scared because she's like almost too um uh, uh abrasive to be ever scared of anything of the world around her. I found it fascinating, and I know people like that. I've met people
Sure.
like that. I've had friends that that really reminded me of, and so I was just really fascinated by that. And there was controversy about like, oh, you're giving this person a platform, and I could certainly appreciate that, but I did find it an interesting conversation. My biggest regret is that was back when we were only showing, I think we were showing these screenings in the TIFF light box, and you could only let 200 people in because of COVID restrictions and protocols. You couldn't have people sitting beside each other, and I was just a little, I did feel like that was a movie I wished I'd heard a whole room collectively fight over, and where you feel
Mm.
like half the room is so into this, half the room is like tearing their hair out. Um, that I think, I mean, I think that whether you like the film or not, I think it was a film that was delivering a midnight experience, something that was going to provoke. And I do think if I'm not splitting the room at least a couple times in my section, then I'm not doing my job.
Well, I really love what you said about, you gotta trust your programmer that can sit through a movie because never trust a bartender that doesn't drink.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's similar philosophy. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I also wanted to say, the same vibe as I forget the name, but when you cut they were cutting up a film that already existed to give it a new vibe. I forget the name that you mentioned.
Racer
Brain
trash. Racer
Racer
trash.
Trash.
Yeah.
Same vibe as the guy who does the Twin Peaks Seinfeld.
Oh yeah,
Because
yeah, 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 for sure. In fact,
right?
there was a Racer Trash editor who I think did something like that where they took well, it was Showgirls. They took Paul Verhoeven's Showgirls and they rescored
Nice.
it with Twin Peaks and Mulholland Drive and Lost Highway cues. And I mean, I love Showgirls already, but like, wow, that version of it was pretty amazing.
That sounds incredible. And of course, we just lost
Yeah, I
David
believe
Lynch.
we just lost the great David Lynch, and that editor, I'll give him a plug, is Ariel Gardner. I think it might even be on his Vimeo channel, but if you could check out his work, he was a Racer Trasher, and he now they a lot of the Racer Trash members have started their own another collective called Dream Video Division, and if they run streams on Twitch TV from time to time, and it's well worth checking their work out if you're interested in remix art.
Yeah, wonderful. I think we can get into the kind of maybe more rapid fire questions, which I will
All
use
right.
to promote the episode. Now, one thing you mentioned, and these don't have to be short responses. Actually, I would love a thoughtful response from you, as you've been giving, which is awesome. One of the things you mentioned, which has stuck with me this whole time, was the rock concert atmosphere of of your screenings of Midnight Madness. Um, Genre film soundtracks are sort of a platform for subversive music, right? You
Hmm.
have subgenres, niche subgenres of metal and rock and hardcore punk that
A
come
and
in.
the Midnight Section, actually, half if you look at the first year of Midnight Madness, half the lineup was music movies.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it was very much a section for generated not just for horror films and genre films, but for alt culture. And I have been interested in trying to bring more of that into the festival, and I haven't. I'll be honest, I haven't been that successful. But it was one of the reasons why the first film I ever programmed for Midnight Madness was Joseph Kahn's Body, a battle rap movie, not a sort of horror specific genre, science
Right.
fiction or action or martial arts film. It was a battle rap movie, and I'd love to to find more stuff in that space, or even concert films. I just feel like if I'm going to show a concert film, it really needs to be doing something that I've never seen before, and maybe that
Sure.
genre has been or that mode of filmmaking has kind of been done, but
Well, yeah, I just wanted to ask, this crossover seems so obvious. So have you branched out, like, you're obviously a film programmer, but have you familiarized yourself throughout the years with all of these niche subgenres that you may or may not, I'm not sure about your music background, may or may not have been familiar with? And what are your favorite bands? What are your favorite genres?
I mean, I'm kind of hopeless when it comes to music in terms of musical knowledge. My brothers are very musically inclined. My brother Luke Kuplowsky is a really talented folk singer, and I usually rely on them for opinions. I'm a big fan of folk music, though. My favorite band, though, is probably They Might Be Giants.
Oh, sweet.
I really got into the Mountain Goats in the last couple of years.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
same vibe.
I'm an enormous fan of musical theater. I listen to a lot of musical theater. My dreams as a producer is to produce a musical. So it's kind of an eclectic smattering
Yeah, yeah, that's what I could
of
tell.
stuff. But yeah, I mean, I but at the same and at the same time, like I grew up in the 90s and early 2000s, so I can rock to new metal. I wouldn't
Hell
say I'm
yeah.
like I
I mean,
know a lot or
Deftones
a
have had an
fan,
insane
but listen,
revival.
I love the soundtrack to the Jet Li movie.
Oh, hell yeah.
With Papa Roach and Drowning Pool and all that stuff. Like
Oh, amazing.
that's a fun time. So I mean, I'm as eclectic as I guess my Midnight Madness programming strives to be as well. I consider myself fairly curious, and I like investigating um, music as deeply as I investigate film. I think I get that from my father, who was a big music collector. He still is, and our house, the family house, is full of vinyl and CDs and all that. I mean, yeah. So uh, I love music, and I honestly I love the idea of organizing. I love mixtape culture and putting together music playlists, and I do that a lot with. I do like to organize playlists and come up with playlists, and I treat the Midnight Madness section as a playlist.
Yeah, that's awesome. I wanna go back to something you mentioned about bringing in different cultural contexts, despite there being cliches within the genre film, like you've mentioned before, the one bad day stereotype, like we
Yeah,
get an after hours, but we also get that context in a different cultural context with Naga and Saudi Arabia.
yeah,
You've also
yeah.
worked with countries like Serbia with Working Class Goes to Hell. What is a country that you've still yet to showcase, that you've been dying to show off their film industry? And, what's a country you hope will, like, break through to genre film from
Well, when I started, they were doing fine without me, but I really couldn't believe that Midnight Madness had never played a movie from India, and I was
Yeah,
so
Kill was
excited.
incredible, by the way.
Kill is awesome. Before that, the first one was that I included in the section was The Man Who Feels No Pain, which won the People's Choice
Oh,
Award
wow.
for the Midnight Madness section. That was the first Indian film to ever play um, the section, and so that was a big one for me. And now I'm in the great position where Indian production companies are like interested in taking their genre movies to TIFF. I just think that for a long time they made movies for their local market, and then they released it to the diaspora market, and they just didn't think the rest of the Western world would be interested. And we now live in a post RRR
Post-RRR,
era.
that's right.
So there is really, and now TIFF Lightbox is hosting Indian genre movies all the time, which I think is great. So I'd love to
Awesome.
continue to play movies out of India. A few years ago, I played a Ugandan action movie, Bad Black, and I am really encouraged by the work that's happening in Africa. Bad Black is an example of very low budget action movie and a low budget action independent film scene. But then a few years ago, I played a film called Saloom, which I thought was just extraordinary. Jean-Luc Hubele was the filmmaker, and that was out of Senegal. And he's a Congolese filmmaker. And I would love to see more genre work come out of Africa. I really think it is the next frontier for action cinema and horror cinema. There's a lot of film production that is happening in South Africa. That are Western filmmakers going over there and shooting stuff. So I'd love to see more from that part of the world, and I think we are going to, and I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, lovely. Um, what is a genre cliché that you've been itching for a new movie from? Like, where are all the great werewolf movies?
Oh yeah. Well, Robert Eggers might be making one. He
Oh,
just
true,
announced,
true.
and we just had a werewolf movie from Lee Winnell that I haven't seen yet, but I haven't heard is very good. So unfortunately, because I loved Invisible Man, so I was really rooting it for it. I mean, I had a great time with Alien Romulus. I didn't think it was a great movie, but I thought it was a great universal horror maze where it was just taking you through all your favorite scenes from other Alien films. And I love space horror, and I would love to see some more space horror, some more Event Horizons. I hope they continue to make a dozen more Alien films. I've always loved that kind of intersection of two very classic genres mashed together. So those ones for sure. I'd love. I mean, I said it earlier. I'm a big musical theater fan. I want to see some more good movie musicals. I love Better Man. Actually, when I saw Better Man, I was actually a little regretful that I hadn't seen the film earlier, or I would have fought to put that at Midnight Madness because I
Yeah,
just
well,
thought that film was totally mad and just so energetic and so inspiring from just a creative standpoint, whether or not you know who Robbie Williams is or are interested
sure.
in Robbie Williams' music. I really just thought it definitely was a quintessential Midnight Madness kind of um, experience to see that film.
Awesome. To wrap up here, I want to ask you how it feels to be the lead programmer of Midnight Madness for TIFF's 50th iteration. And is there more pressure this year than ever before, or are you not worried?
I mean, I feel the pressure
Is there
every
ice in your
year.
veins now?
Yeah, I feel the pressure every year, and that I really do want to deliver. It's important to me to deliver an experience that feels different every night. It doesn't feel like you're just getting the same kind of movie every night. It feels like, again, it's providing opportunities for the audience to see the films they're excited about even before they hear it getting announced for the festival, to discover films they didn't know they would even be excited about, to support new filmmakers and alumni filmmakers. It's the same pressure every year, and I do take it very seriously. Um, and But in terms of the 50th anniversary, I haven't thought too much about how it will change at the festival itself. I know that to commemorate the festival, TIFF is planning to do a 50 film series that we announced just recently, where we will be doing retrospective screenings throughout the summer. There are going to be Midnight Madness titles in there. I was conferred I conferred with Cameron Bailey on that list, and we'll see how it shakes up. Sometimes it's a matter of rights availability, but it was an interesting thought experiment to think of, like, okay, what are the films that I feel are like really important and really represent um, what the what the section has done over the last. I mean, because the section itself isn't 50 years old. The section is like
Right.
30 something.
Sure, but it's still part of the history of TIFF, right?
Yeah, yeah, and there was still very meaningful premieres and moments. So it'll be, but I won't. We haven't announced the film, so I won't say them specifically. But I remember thinking, okay, so there's one of the big aspects of Midnight Madness is its martial arts programming, and then I was like, well, what was the more seismic film? Was it Ong Bak or was it The Raid? Arguably, Ong Bak was like one of the first big South Asian martial arts films, and it brought in a totally new martial arts style to international audiences. So did The Raid, but but which one was the sort of the bigger one if you had to choose only one? And so those are kind of the conversations that we've been having as putting together that lineup. But I certainly hope to acknowledge Midnights of yesteryear during the 50th anniversary in a significant way. Maybe bring Colin out to do some presentations with me. But otherwise, I'm doing that year round with my co-curator Leanne Kunji at the TIFF Lightbox. We have a series called Midnight Madness Presents, where we celebrate films from the Midnight Madness lineup since the beginning of Midnight Madness, and we also hypothesize what films might have played Midnight Madness in years where the section didn't exist and before the
That's
festival
cool.
even existed. So we do, like just recently, we played Bob Clark's Dead of Night, or Death Dream, as it's also known, and that's a 1974 film. So that's a film that precedes the Midnight Madness section, but it's one of my favorite exploitation films. I think it's a really powerful movie about the post-Vietnam psyche of the American male, and I was so excited to share that movie, and I really do think if I was programming in 1974, it might have been a film that I selected for the Midnight Madness section.
Awesome. Well, Peter, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us, and the audience. If your film programmer is not in the audience with you during a screening, I think you can safely walk out.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, it's a luxury. The other people sometimes don't have that.
No, they want to go to parties. That's what you said. I'm just kidding. I'm messing with you. Okay, well, thank you again. I really appreciate you joining us.
No, it was great. Great talking to you, Shawn.
Awesome.